"Ma'am, step away from the bag, right now." The command cut clean through the morning air, sharp enough to turn heads before anyone even knew why. Sunlight spilled across the sidewalk in long golden lines, reflecting off windshields and storefront glass, catching on the silver badge pinned to Officer Ryan Whitaker's chest as he stepped forward with controlled precision, his boots firm against the concrete, each step measured, deliberate, practiced. Imani Carter didn't move. Not at first. She stood there in the middle of it all, framed by daylight and silence, one hand resting lightly on the worn strap of a faded duffel bag at her feet, her posture steady, her breathing even, like someone who had already decided how this moment would unfold long before it ever arrived. A city bus hissed to a stop half a block away, but no one got off. People stayed where they were, watching. A man in a gray hoodie slowed his walk. A woman holding a paper coffee cup paused mid-sip, her eyes narrowing. Something in the air had shifted, not loud, not chaotic, just tight, suspended. "I said step away," Ryan repeated, his voice lower now, more controlled, like he was pressing down on something unseen, something he didn't fully trust. His partner moved to the side, subtly closing the angle, creating space that wasn't really space at all. Two uniforms. One woman. A corner without walls. Imani's gaze lifted slowly, meeting his, not with defiance, not with fear, just clarity. The kind that made people uncomfortable because it didn't ask for permission. "You don't need to do this," she said, her voice quiet but steady, carrying farther than it should have in the stillness of the street. Ryan didn't respond right away. His jaw tightened slightly, just enough to show tension beneath the surface. Around them, the morning continued, but differently. Car engines idled longer than usual. A delivery driver leaned halfway out of his truck, pretending to check a manifest he wasn't reading. Even the light felt sharper, bouncing off chrome and glass, outlining every movement with uncomfortable precision. "We got a report," Ryan said finally. "Suspicious activity. Matching description." The words sounded official, routine, but something about the way he said them lacked weight, like even he knew they didn't fully land. Imani glanced down briefly at the duffel bag, then back up. "And what part of me looks suspicious?" she asked, not challenging, just asking. The question hung there, heavier than any command. Ryan shifted his stance, one hand resting near his belt, not threatening, but close enough to signal control. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step back so we can take a look inside." A breeze moved through the street, light but noticeable, brushing against Imani's jacket, carrying the faint scent of asphalt warming under the sun. Somewhere in the distance, a car horn sounded, brief and irrelevant. She exhaled slowly, then nodded once. No resistance, no sudden movement, just a quiet decision. She crouched down, placing the duffel gently on the pavement, her fingers lingering on the zipper for half a second longer than necessary. Ryan watched closely, eyes tracking every motion, every shift in posture. His partner stepped in slightly, positioning himself to the side, maintaining the formation. Control, containment, procedure. Imani released the bag and stood back up, taking a single step away, exactly as instructed. Her hands came up, not high, not exaggerated, just visible. Calm, compliant, but not small, never small. Ryan moved forward, crouching near the bag, his shadow stretching long across the pavement, merging with hers for just a moment before separating again. He reached for the zipper, hesitated, just briefly, then pulled it open. The sound was soft, almost insignificant, but in the silence, it felt louder than it should have. Inside, nothing alarming. Clothes, folded, worn but clean. A pair of gloves. A metal water bottle catching a sliver of sunlight. Ordinary. Too ordinary. Ryan's brow furrowed slightly. Behind him, someone whispered, "That's it." Another voice, quieter, "Then why?" The question didn't finish. Ryan straightened, glancing back at Imani, reassessing, recalculating, something subtle shifting behind his eyes. "You carrying anything else?" he asked. Imani shook her head once. "No, sir." Her tone didn't change. Still calm, still grounded. But now, something else lingered beneath it. Not tension, not fear. Timing. The kind that didn't rush. The kind that waited. And somewhere, just beyond the edge of the moment, too far for most to notice, too quiet for anyone to name, something moved. Not loud, Not fast. Just approaching. Ryan Whitaker did not zip the bag back up right away. He stayed crouched for a second longer than necessary, eyes scanning what was already obvious, like he was hoping something hidden would suddenly reveal itself and justify the tension that had gathered around them. The sunlight hit the metal bottle again, reflecting a thin line of brightness across his wrist, and he blinked once, slow, thoughtful. Behind him, the quiet was no longer empty. It was filled with watching. Shoes shifting on pavement. A faint murmur rising and falling like something people could not quite hold back anymore. His partner cleared his throat softly, just enough to break the stillness without drawing attention. "Sir." Ryan exhaled through his nose and stood, brushing his hand lightly against his pant leg, though there was nothing on it. His posture remained straight, controlled, but something in his shoulders had changed, just slightly, like a weight had shifted from certainty to something less defined. He looked at Imani again, this time not scanning, not sizing up, just looking. She stood exactly where she had stepped back to, hands relaxed at her sides now, her face calm, almost unreadable, but her eyes steady, anchored. She was not trying to leave. She was not trying to explain. She was simply there, present in a way that made everything else feel louder by comparison. "You said there is nothing else?" Ryan asked again, his tone softer now, less command, more question. "There is nothing illegal," Imani replied, her voice even, the word choice precise, intentional. That pause after the word nothing lingered just long enough to be noticed. Ryan's brow tightened a fraction. "That is not exactly what I asked." A faint breeze moved through again, lifting a loose strand of Imani's hair, brushing it across her cheek before it settled back. She did not move to fix it. "It is the answer you needed," she said quietly. The words did not challenge him. They redirected him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The space between them stretched, not hostile, not aggressive, just charged with something neither side had fully named yet. A car rolled past slowly, the driver glancing over, then looking forward again, as if unsure whether to keep watching or pretend nothing was happening. Ryan shifted his weight slightly, glancing down at the open bag again, then back up at Imani. Something about her stillness did not match the situation he thought he was in. People who were hiding something usually filled silence with movement, with words, with tension. She did none of that. She simply stood, like she was waiting for something he could not see. "Dispatch said you were pacing," his partner added from the side, his voice careful, like he was trying to support the narrative without pushing too hard. Back and forth, holding the bag. Imani nodded once. "I was waiting." "For what?" Ryan asked immediately. This time, the question came faster, sharper, like he needed it to land before the moment shifted again. Imani's eyes flicked briefly past him, not enough to turn her head, just a glance, like checking a point on a map she already knew by heart. Then she looked back at him. For them to arrive on time. The answer did not raise her voice. It did not need to. It settled into the space like something already decided. Ryan followed her glance instinctively, turning his head just slightly toward the direction she had looked, but there was nothing there. Just the street. Just morning. Just people pretending not to stare. He looked back at her, a faint crease forming between his brows. "Who?" he asked. The question hung there, heavier now, edged with something that was no longer just procedure. Imani did not answer right away. Instead, she shifted her stance just enough to square her shoulders, her posture aligning in a way that felt deliberate, practiced. Not defensive, not aggressive. Ready. The kind of ready that did not rush because it did not need to. Somewhere in the distance, there was a sound. Faint. Easy to miss if you were not listening for it. Not a siren. Not a voice. Something lower. Rhythmic. Controlled. It came again, slightly closer this time, threading through the background noise of the city like a second layer most people would ignore. Ryan's head turned again, slower now, his attention catching on it even if he could not name it yet. His partner glanced in the same direction, his posture tightening just a fraction. The murmurs from the small crowd softened, like something instinctive told them to quiet down without knowing why. Imani's gaze did not follow the sound this time. She kept her eyes on Ryan, steady, unwavering, almost patient. "You said I matched a description," she said calmly, bringing his attention back to her. "What description was that?" Ryan hesitated, just for a second. The question was simple, but the answer felt less so now. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, recalculating. The sound came again. Closer. Clearer. Not loud, but distinct enough now that it separated itself from everything else. A pattern. A pace. Not random. Not uncertain. Intentional. Ryan's hand shifted slightly near his belt, not reaching, just adjusting, as if his body was responding before his mind had caught up. He glanced past her once more, longer this time, his eyes narrowing as he tried to place what he was hearing. Imani finally let a small breath out, almost imperceptible, like a clock ticking toward a moment only she could see. "You asked me to step away from the bag," she said softly. "I did," Ryan replied, his voice quieter now. "And I did exactly that," she continued, her tone still even, but carrying something underneath it now, something closer to certainty. The sound drew nearer, still controlled, still measured, like something trained not to rush, not to break rhythm. One of the bystanders shifted back half a step without realizing it. Another lowered their phone slightly, unsure whether to keep recording or not. Ryan felt it then, not fear, not yet, but awareness, the kind that starts at the edges and moves inward, tightening focus, sharpening senses. He turned his head fully this time, looking down the street, trying to locate the source, his posture no longer just authoritative, but alert. And behind him, without raising her voice, without moving from her place, Imani said, "Now you might want to step back too." Ryan Whitaker did not move right away, but something inside his stance shifted the second those words landed. Not a step, not yet, but a tightening through his shoulders, a recalibration that ran deeper than posture. The sound was no longer distant now. It was close enough to carry shape. 4-beat rhythm. Controlled footfalls. Not rushed. Not scattered. Deliberate. His partner turned fully this time, eyes narrowing down the street, his hand hovering near his radio, unsure whether to call it in or wait. The bystanders felt it too. Conversations that had been whispering a moment ago faded into silence without anyone saying so. A man lowered his coffee cup slowly, forgetting to drink. A woman took one unconscious step backward, then another, as if her body understood something her mind had not caught up to yet. The air shifted. Not louder, just heavier. Ryan's gaze locked onto the far end of the block, and that was when he saw movement. Low to the ground at first. Fast, but not frantic. Two shapes, cutting clean lines through the open sidewalk, weaving past obstacles without hesitation, their motion smooth, efficient, trained. His breath paused for half a second, just enough to register that this was not random. These were not stray animals. These were not uncontrolled. These were precise. "Hold position," he said under his breath, though it sounded more like a reminder to himself than a command to anyone else. The shapes drew closer, resolving into form. Two dogs. Large. Lean. Muscles defined beneath short coats that caught the sunlight in subtle flashes as they moved. Their strides were synchronized, almost mirrored, each step landing with quiet certainty, claws barely audible against the pavement. No barking. No growling. Just focus. Pure, forward focus. Ryan felt the shift ripple through his chest, that quiet transition from control to awareness, from assumption to recognition. His partner took a small step back, instinctive, not dramatic, just enough to change his balance. "Sir," he murmured, the word trailing off as he watched. The dogs did not look at the crowd. They did not react to the movement, the tension, the attention. Their eyes were locked on a single point. Imani. She had not moved. Not a step. Not a flinch. Her hands rested naturally at her sides now, her posture aligned, grounded, like a fixed point everything else was moving toward. The sunlight traced the edge of her face, highlighting the calm in her expression, the absence of urgency. She was not surprised. She was not relieved. She was simply ready. The first dog reached her side and stopped instantly, its body shifting from motion to stillness in a single, fluid transition, like a switch had been flipped. The second followed half a second later, taking position on her other side, slightly behind, angled outward. Protective, structured, intentional. The formation was not random. It was practiced. Ryan's breath slowed, but his heartbeat did not. He watched the way they stood, the way their heads remained level, their eyes scanning without agitation, their ears alert but not tense. This was discipline, the kind you did not teach in a backyard, the kind that came from repetition, from command, from a system bigger than the moment. One of the dogs turned its head slightly toward Ryan, not aggressive, not challenging, just aware. The gaze held for a second, then returned forward, as if confirming something and moving on. Ryan felt it in his chest, that subtle, unmistakable realization settling into place. He was no longer leading this moment. The balance had shifted, not loudly, not dramatically, but completely. Behind him, someone whispered, "Those are not normal dogs." Another voice, softer. "Look how they move," but no one stepped forward. No one interrupted. The street had gone still again, but this time it was different. Not curiosity, not tension, respect. Unspoken, but present. Ryan's hand, which had been hovering near his belt, lowered slowly, his fingers relaxing one by one, as if releasing something he had been holding without realizing it. He glanced at Imani, really looked at her now, taking in the alignment of her stance, the way the dogs mirrored her presence, the quiet authority that did not announce itself but did not need to. "You did not mention this," he said, his voice measured, careful, as if choosing each word with more weight than before. Imani's eyes met his, steady as ever, but now there was something else there. Not satisfaction, not triumph, clarity. "You did not ask the right questions," she replied, her tone calm, but not dismissive. Just factual. Ryan let out a slow breath, the edges of the situation sharpening into something new, something he had not prepared for when he first stepped out of his vehicle that morning. He glanced at the dogs again, then back at her, his posture no longer squared in control, but adjusted in awareness, like a man stepping into a different role without fully realizing it yet. "Are they under your control?" he asked, the question coming out quieter than expected. One of the dogs shifted slightly, not forward, not back, just adjusting its stance, its focus never breaking. Imani tilted her head just a fraction, the smallest acknowledgement of the question. "They are not here for you," she said. The words landed softly, but their meaning carried weight. Ryan swallowed once, his gaze flicking to the dogs again, then to the bag still open on the ground, then back to her. The scene that had begun with command and certainty now stood on something else entirely, something he was only beginning to understand. And in the quiet space between them, under the steady morning light, it became clear that whatever he thought this situation was, he had only seen the surface. Ryan Whitaker did not answer her right away. His eyes lingered on the dogs, then shifted back to Imani, then back again, like he was trying to place a pattern that had already revealed itself but had not yet settled in his mind. The morning light seemed brighter now, sharper along the edges of everything, outlining the curve of the duffel bag on the ground, the polished surface of his badge, the steady silhouettes of the two dogs flanking her like living markers of something official, something structured, something he could no longer reduce to a misunderstanding. A bead of sweat traced slowly along the back of his neck beneath his collar, not from heat, but from awareness. "If they are not here for me," he said carefully, "then why are they here at all?" His voice was controlled, but the certainty from earlier had thinned, replaced by something more measured, more cautious. Imani glanced down at one of the dogs briefly, her fingers lowering just enough to brush along the side of its neck, not as a command, not as reassurance, just contact. The dog did not react dramatically. It did not lean into her touch or shift its stance. It remained exactly where it was, steady, focused, as if her presence alone was instruction enough. She lifted her gaze back to Ryan. "They are here because I am," she said simply. The answer landed without emphasis, but it carried a weight that settled deeper than explanation. Ryan's partner shifted again, his boots scraping lightly against the pavement as he adjusted his footing, eyes flicking between Imani and the dogs, then toward Ryan, waiting for direction that did not come. The small crowd had grown slightly, though no one stepped too close. Phones were held lower now, not out of disinterest, but out of hesitation, like recording no longer felt appropriate. A delivery truck idled longer than it should have, its driver leaning against the door, watching with quiet intensity. Ryan took a slow breath, then another, grounding himself, recalibrating. He had walked into this moment expecting control, expecting clarity, expecting a simple resolution that followed a familiar pattern. But nothing about this felt familiar anymore. He looked down at the duffel bag again, then back at her. "You said you were waiting," he continued. "Waiting for them. That implies intent." Imani nodded once. It does. Intent for what? He pressed, not aggressively, but with focus, like he needed the answer to re-anchor the situation. She held his gaze for a second longer than before, measuring, deciding. Then she stepped forward. Not quickly, not abruptly, just one step. The dogs did not follow. They adjusted. One shifted half a step closer to her original position, maintaining the formation, the invisible boundary that had formed around her without a word being spoken. Ryan noticed that immediately. His eyes tracked the movement, the precision, the silent coordination that required no command. His chest tightened slightly, not in fear, but in recognition. This was not accidental. You stopped me because of a description, Imani said, her voice still calm, still even. A report. Something you believed might be a problem. Ryan nodded faintly. That is correct. And you were ready to act on that belief, she continued, before you knew anything else. The words were not sharp. They were not accusatory. They were placed carefully. Ryan opened his mouth, then paused, the response catching for just a moment as the truth of it settled into the space between them. He closed his mouth again, exhaling slowly. We respond to what we are given, he said, but the sentence sounded less certain than it would have minutes ago. Imani tilted her head slightly, the smallest shift, like she was acknowledging the statement without agreeing to it. And sometimes, she said, what you are given is incomplete. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of realization, quiet and spreading. One of the dogs shifted its weight subtly, adjusting its stance, its attention still forward, still steady, its presence constant without being threatening. Ryan noticed how the crowd had repositioned, not scattering, not pressing in, but holding a respectful distance, as if the center of gravity had moved and they were adjusting to it instinctively. He looked back at Imani, and this time there was no attempt to assert control, no attempt to regain the upper ground. Just a question. So what am I missing? He asked. The words came out softer than anything he had said since stepping out of his car. Imani studied him for a moment, not judging, not rushing. Then she reached down toward the duffel bag, slow enough that no one tensed, deliberate enough that everyone watched. She knelt, her fingers moving inside, not searching, not fumbling, but retrieving. When she stood again, she held a small, rectangular object between her fingers. Dark, structured, official. The sunlight caught along its edge as she turned it slightly, just enough for the surface to reflect. She did not hand it to him immediately. She held it where he could see. Ryan's eyes locked onto it, the shape familiar even before the details came into focus. His breath slowed again, but this time not from tension, from recognition. The edges, the material, the insignia faintly visible beneath the glare of the sun. His posture shifted again, not dramatically, but completely. The weight of the moment settled into place with quiet certainty. Imani met his eyes one more time, her voice steady, grounded in something that no longer needed to prove itself. You were not wrong to pay attention, she said. You were just early. And in that moment, under the clear morning light, with the dogs standing silent at her side and the street holding its breath around them, Ryan understood that the situation had never been about what he thought it was, and that the line between suspicion and understanding was thinner than he had ever allowed himself to see. Ryan Whitaker did not reach for the object immediately. His hand hovered in front of him for a brief second, suspended between instinct and understanding, before he finally extended it, slower than before, more deliberate, like he knew this moment carried weight beyond procedure. The card met his fingers without resistance. Solid, real, official in a way that did not need explanation. He turned it slightly, the sunlight catching across its surface, illuminating the insignia stamped into it, the lettering precise, unmistakable. His eyes moved across it once, then again, slower the second time, as if confirming what he had already seen but had not yet fully accepted. Military K-9 unit. The words settled into his chest with quiet force. Not loud, not dramatic, just undeniable. A subtle shift passed through his posture, not visible to most, but present in the way his shoulders eased, in the way his stance no longer pressed forward but held steady instead. Behind him, his partner leaned slightly to the side, trying to catch a glimpse, his earlier tension replaced with something closer to uncertainty. Sir, he asked softly, not pushing, just checking. Ryan did not respond right away. He kept his eyes on the card for one more second, then lifted his gaze back to Imani. The difference in his expression was small, but clear. The edge was gone, not replaced with friendliness. Not yet, but replaced with recognition. "You are with a federal unit," he said, his voice measured, no longer testing, no longer assuming. Imani gave a slight nod, nothing exaggerated, just acknowledgement. "Attached," she corrected quietly. "Not stationed." Ryan processed that, the distinction registering even if he did not fully understand the structure behind it. He handed the card back to her carefully, not casually, not dismissively, but with the kind of respect that comes when information changes the frame of a situation entirely. Imani took it without comment, slipping it back into the inner pocket of her jacket, the movement smooth, practiced. The dogs remained exactly where they were, still, composed, their presence unchanged, like fixed points in a scene that had shifted around them. The crowd had gone quieter now, not because there was less happening, but because there was more to understand. Phones lowered further. Conversations faded completely. Even the hum of traffic seemed to dull at the edges, as if the moment had narrowed into something more focused. Ryan cleared his throat once, not out of discomfort, but to reset his voice, to find the right tone for what came next. "You said you were waiting," he continued, his words slower now, more considered. "Waiting for them to arrive. That suggests there is something ongoing." Imani looked at him for a second, measuring again, deciding what to give, what to hold. Then she nodded once. "There is." The answer did not expand. It did not explain. It simply confirmed. Ryan felt that same shift again, the one that had started earlier but had now settled fully into place. This was not his scene anymore. Not in the way he had entered it. He glanced at the dogs, then back at her. "Is there a reason we were not informed?" he asked, the question careful, not accusatory, just seeking clarity. Imani's expression did not change, but her eyes softened slightly, not toward him, but toward the situation itself. "Timing," she said. "And visibility." Ryan frowned faintly, the pieces not fully connecting yet. "Visibility?" She gestured lightly toward the street around them, not pointing, not drawing attention, just indicating. "Sometimes," she said, "you need to see how people react before you step in." The words landed differently this time. Not as correction, not as challenge, as context. Ryan's gaze shifted across the scene, the bystanders, the positions people had taken, the way the situation had escalated and then transformed. He saw it now, not as a random stop, but as a moment that had revealed something. Something about him. About the way he had approached. About the speed of his assumptions. His jaw tightened slightly, not defensively, but in thought. His partner shifted again, quieter now, his earlier readiness replaced with observation. "So this was a test?" the partner asked, unable to hold the question back. Imani shook her head once. "No," she said. "It was a moment." The distinction hung in the air, subtle but important. Ryan exhaled slowly, the tension that had defined the beginning of the encounter now replaced with something else entirely. Reflection. Awareness. He looked at her again, this time without the filter he had started with. Not as a subject, not as a potential issue, as a person standing in front of him with context he had not taken the time to see. "I made a call based on what I saw," he said finally, his voice steady, not defensive, not apologetic yet, but honest. Imani nodded slightly. "You did. And I did not see everything," he added, the words coming slower, but landing with more weight. She did not respond right away. She did not need to. The acknowledgement itself was enough. The dogs remained still, their presence constant, grounding the moment in something that no longer felt uncertain. Ryan glanced down at the duffel bag once more, then back at her. "What happens now?" he asked. The question was different from the ones before. Not seeking control, not seeking justification, seeking direction. Imani let a small breath out, the first visible sign of release since the moment began. "Now," she said quietly, "you step back." Ryan held her gaze for a second, then nodded once. Not out of obligation, out of understanding. He took a single step back. Small, controlled, but meaningful. His partner followed a second later, mirroring the movement without needing to be told. The space between them shifted again, but this time it was not about distance. It was about balance. And for the first time since the encounter began, the morning light felt less sharp, less tense, settling back into something closer to normal, even as the weight of what had just unfolded remained quietly present in every detail around them. Ryan Whitaker felt the shift settle fully the moment his boots moved that single step back. The concrete beneath him no longer a line he controlled, but a boundary he now respected. The distance between him and Imani was not large, no more than a few feet, but it carried a different weight now, no longer charged with suspicion, no longer anchored in assumption, but something quieter, something more deliberate. The morning light softened across the street, catching in the glass windows behind her, reflecting faint silhouettes of the crowd that had gathered but no longer pressed in. They watched differently now, not waiting for escalation, not expecting confrontation, but observing something they did not often get to see, a moment where direction changed without force, where authority adjusted without being told. Ryan's partner shifted beside him, lowering his stance just slightly, his hand no longer hovering near his radio, his posture no longer tight with readiness, but open, uncertain, learning. The dogs remained exactly where they were, silent, composed, their presence steady in a way that did not demand attention but held it anyway. One of them turned its head just enough to scan the edge of the street, then returned to stillness, its focus never drifting far from Imani. Ryan noticed that detail, the way the animal moved with purpose even in small adjustments, the way it did not react to noise, to motion, to the presence of strangers. It did not need to. It knew its role. He drew in a slow breath, the kind that grounded more than it filled, letting it out just as carefully, his eyes returning to Imani. "You said this is ongoing," he said, his voice quieter now, not because he had to lower it, but because the moment called for it. "That means there is more coming." Imani nodded once, her gaze steady, her posture unchanged. "There always is," she replied. The answer did not carry urgency. It carried certainty. Ryan glanced briefly down the street again, the direction the dogs had come from, then back at her, connecting the pieces not as isolated details, but as part of something structured, something planned beyond the scope of a routine stop. "Are we in the way?" he asked. The question came without hesitation this time, without pride attached to it, just clarity. Imani's eyes softened just slightly, not in sympathy, but in acknowledgement. "You were," she said calmly. "Now you are not." The distinction landed without sting. It was not a correction. It was a transition. Behind them, a car door closed somewhere down the block, the sound echoing lightly through the open space, drawing a few glances, but no one moved toward it. The focus remained here. Ryan shifted his weight again, but this time it was not adjustment. It was acceptance. He nodded once, small but firm, his stance settling into something that no longer pushed forward. "Understood," he said. The word held more than agreement. It held recognition of a boundary he had crossed without knowing, and the awareness of stepping back from it. Imani lowered her gaze briefly toward the duffel bag, still resting open on the pavement, then back up, as if marking the transition point herself. She stepped forward again, slow and controlled, closing the small distance to the bag. The dogs did not move toward her. They adjusted their angles, maintaining the same protective structure, their bodies aligned with her movement without breaking formation. Ryan watched that closely, the coordination, the silent communication that did not rely on commands spoken out loud. He felt something shift in his understanding again, deeper this time, beyond the immediate moment, into something about training, about trust, about presence. Imani crouched, reaching into the bag with the same calm precision as before, her fingers moving without hesitation, retrieving a small folded item, fabric worn but clean, edges neat, something that looked simple but carried intention. She stood again, holding it loosely in one hand. Ryan's eyes tracked the movement, not out of suspicion now, but attention. Everything she did had purpose. That much was clear. "You were looking for something that did not belong," she said, her voice even, not accusatory, just stating what had been. Ryan nodded faintly. "That is correct." She glanced at the item in her hand, then back at him. "And you found what was there instead." He exhaled lightly, a small acknowledgement. "Yes." The simplicity of the exchange carried more weight than the earlier commands, more clarity than the initial confrontation. Around them, the crowd had begun to shift again, not dispersing entirely, but loosening, conversations returning in low tones, the tension no longer holding them in place. A man lifted his phone again, but only for a second, then lowered it, as if deciding this was not something to capture, but something to understand. Ryan noticed that too, the way the energy of the space was changing, not abruptly, but steadily, like a tide pulling back after reaching its highest point. He looked at Imani once more, and for the first time since the moment began, there was no question forming, no assumption waiting behind his eyes. Just presence. "Is there anything you need from us?" he asked. The words came naturally now, not forced, not rehearsed, just aligned with where he stood. Imani held his gaze for a moment, considering, then shook her head slightly. "No," she said. "Just space." Ryan nodded again, the movement easier this time, more certain. "You have it." He took another small step back, his partner following without hesitation, the two of them repositioning not as a barrier, but as observers at the edge of something that was no longer theirs to control. The dogs remained still, the street slowly returning to its rhythm, the morning light settling back into something ordinary, even as the weight of what had just unfolded lingered quietly in every detail. And standing there, just outside the center of it all, Ryan understood that stepping back was not losing control, it was recognizing where control had never belonged to him in the first place. The moment did not end all at once. It eased, slowly, like tension draining out of a room one breath at a time. Ryan Whitaker remained where he had stepped back, his posture no longer rigid, no longer framed by command, but held in a quieter kind of attention. The weight in his chest had shifted into something steadier, something that did not press outward but settled inward, asking him to look, not react. Across from him, Imani Carter moved with the same calm precision, folding the item in her hand and placing it back into the duffel with care, not rushed, not distracted, each motion deliberate as if it belonged to a rhythm only she followed. The dogs adjusted again, barely noticeable unless you were watching closely, their bodies maintaining that invisible perimeter around her, their presence constant, their focus unbroken. A light breeze passed through the street, carrying the faint hum of traffic from farther down the block, the city beginning to breathe again after holding itself still. A man across the sidewalk finally took a sip from his now lukewarm coffee. Another person slipped their phone back into their pocket, the instinct to record replaced by something quieter, something closer to reflection. Ryan noticed all of it. The way the energy changed. The way people moved again, but differently than before. He had seen crowds gather around tension before. He had seen how quickly curiosity could turn into chaos. But this was not that. This was something else. Something that left people quieter than when it found them. His partner shifted slightly beside him, glancing once more toward Imani and the dogs, then back at Ryan, as if searching for confirmation that what had just happened had actually happened. Ryan did not speak. He did not need to. His expression carried enough. Not confusion, not uncertainty, just processing. Imani zipped the duffel bag closed with a soft, final sound that seemed louder now that everything else had calmed. She lifted it from the ground in one smooth motion, the worn strap settling over her shoulder as if it belonged there, as if it always had. The dogs shifted again, their bodies aligning with her movement. Without breaking formation, one stepping half a pace forward, the other adjusting just enough to remain at her side, their coordination seamless, silent, unquestioned. Ryan watched that closely, the way they responded without being told, the way their awareness extended beyond simple obedience into something deeper, something built on trust and repetition, and something he could not quite name, but could clearly recognize. Imani turned slightly, not fully away, just enough to reorient herself toward the direction she had originally been facing before everything had interrupted her path. The sunlight caught along the edge of her face again, softer now, less sharp, like the moment had reshaped the way the light itself settled across the street. She paused for just a second, then looked back at Ryan. Not long, not lingering, just enough. "Next time," she said quietly, her voice carrying without force, "ask before you assume." The words were not harsh. They did not cut. They landed clean. Ryan held her gaze, the sentence settling into him without resistance, without defense. He nodded once, the movement small but grounded in something real. "I will," he replied. No hesitation, no qualification, just truth. Imani gave the slightest acknowledgement of that, then turned fully this time, stepping forward into the open sidewalk. The dogs moved with her instantly, their formation shifting with her direction, one slightly ahead, one just behind, both maintaining that quiet structure that had defined them from the moment they arrived. They did not look back. They did not need to. Their focus stayed forward, their pace steady, their presence contained but unmistakable. The crowd parted naturally, not out of fear, not out of urgency, but out of respect, creating space without being told, allowing her to pass without interruption. Ryan remained where he was, watching as the distance between them grew. Each step she took placing her further back into the rhythm of the city, into the flow of people and movement and sound that had briefly paused around her. His partner let out a slow breath beside him. "That was something," he said quietly. Ryan did not answer right away. His eyes stayed on the space where she had been, now empty except for sunlight and the faint imprint of a moment that had shifted more than just a situation. Finally, he spoke, his voice low, almost to himself. "Yeah," he said. "It was." The words carried weight, not from what had happened, but from what had changed. He adjusted his stance once more, not to regain control, but to settle into something new, something quieter, something more aware. The radio at his shoulder crackled softly, a reminder that the day was still moving, that calls would come, that decisions would still need to be made. But for a moment longer, he stayed still, letting the lesson settle, letting the silence finish what the moment had started. And somewhere down the block, already blending back into the ordinary, Imani Carter walked on without looking back, her presence leaving behind not noise, not disruption, but something far more lasting, the quiet reminder that dignity does not need to raise its voice to be heard. The street did not return to normal all at once. It settled in layers. Sound came back first, distant engines, the low murmur of conversation, the soft rhythm of footsteps finding their pace again, but something beneath it all remained altered, like a quiet imprint left behind in the air. Ryan Whitaker finally turned away from the direction Imani had gone, but not fully, not immediately, his gaze lingering just a second longer than necessary, as if part of him was still catching up to the moment that had already passed. His partner shifted beside him, running a hand along the back of his neck, letting out a breath that sounded heavier now that everything had calmed. "You ever seen anything like that before?" he asked, his voice low, careful not to break whatever quiet had settled over them. Ryan shook his head once, slow, not dismissive, just honest. "No," he said, "not like that." He reached down and picked up the last detail of the scene that remained, the faint crease in the pavement where the duffel had rested, the small disturbance in the dust, already fading under the movement of passing feet. It was subtle, easy to miss, but he saw it, the mark of where something had shifted. He straightened again, adjusting his stance, but not back into the posture he had started with. This one was different, less rigid, more aware. The radio at his shoulder crackled again, a voice calling out a routine update, something about traffic a few blocks over, something ordinary, something expected. Ryan did not respond right away. He let it pass, just for a moment, allowing the silence to stretch one more time before stepping back into the rhythm of the day. His partner glanced at him, waiting, then followed his lead, adjusting his own posture to match, less tension, more observation. A woman who had been standing near the edge of the sidewalk stepped forward slightly, then hesitated, her eyes moving between the officers and the direction Imani had gone. "She did not do anything wrong, right?" she asked softly, not accusing, not challenging, just needing to understand. Ryan looked at her, really looked this time, seeing not just a bystander, but someone who had watched the entire moment unfold without context, without the details he now carried. He shook his head once. "No," he said. "She did not." The woman nodded slowly, as if something inside her settled with that answer, then turned and walked away, blending back into the movement of the city without another word. Ryan watched her go for a second, then shifted his gaze back to the street, taking in the way everything continued, how quickly people returned to their routines, how easily a moment like that could be absorbed into the background of a day. But for him, it did not fade. Not yet. He reached up and adjusted the radio on his shoulder, finally responding to the call with a calm, steady voice. The same tone he had used 100 times before, but something beneath it had changed, something quieter, something that did not rush to fill space. As he spoke, his eyes moved again, scanning, but differently now, not searching for problems, not looking for patterns to confirm suspicion, but observing, taking in detail without immediately assigning meaning. A man crossed the street in front of him, carrying a bag of groceries, his pace steady, his expression neutral. Ryan watched him pass without narrowing his eyes, without stepping forward, without reaching for a conclusion before the moment asked for it. The difference was small, invisible to most, but it was there. His partner noticed it too, though he could not have named it. Just a subtle shift in how Ryan held himself, how he paused half a second longer before reacting, how his gaze rested instead of pressed. "You think we should report that?" his partner asked after a moment, nodding slightly in the direction Amani had gone. Ryan considered it, the question hanging between procedure and judgment. Then he shook his head slowly. "No," he said. "She already knows where she is supposed to be." The answer carried a quiet confidence, not from authority, but from understanding. His partner nodded once, accepting that, then glanced down the street again, curiosity still lingering, but no longer driving action. The city moved on. Cars rolled past. Conversations picked up. The light shifted slightly as the sun climbed higher, softening the shadows that had stretched across the pavement earlier. And yet, for Ryan, the moment remained, not loud, not overwhelming, but present, like a note that continued to resonate long after the sound had ended. He stepped toward the patrol car, resting a hand briefly on the door, the metal warm under the sun, grounding him in something physical, something immediate. He paused there, just for a second, then looked back down the street one last time, not searching, not expecting, just acknowledging the space where something important had happened. Then he opened the door and got in, the movement smooth, practiced, returning to routine without erasing what had come before it. And as the engine started, the low hum filling the quiet space around him, he understood something he had not before, that not every moment was about control, not every situation was about being right, and that sometimes the most important shift did not happen out there on the street, but inside the person who thought they already understood how it worked. The patrol car did not move right away. Ryan Whitaker sat behind the wheel with his hands resting lightly on it, not gripping, not tense, just placed. There as the engine idled in a low, steady hum. The windshield framed the street ahead, sunlight reflecting softly across the glass, but his focus was not fully on the road yet. It lingered somewhere between the moment that had just passed and the one that was waiting to begin. His partner settled into the passenger seat beside him, closing the door with a quiet click, adjusting his seatbelt, then glancing over, as if expecting Ryan to pull away immediately, to shift gears, to return to motion like they always did. But Ryan stayed still for a second longer. Just one. His eyes moved across the street again, not searching, not scanning for threat, but observing the way the city resumed its rhythm, the way people moved without knowing what had just changed, the way ordinary moments layered over something that, for him, was no longer ordinary at all. A pedestrian crossed at the far end of the block, pushing a stroller, moving at an easy pace, unhurried, unaware. A cyclist passed behind them, the soft whir of tires against pavement barely noticeable unless you were listening for it. Everything was as it should be, and yet it was not the same. Ryan shifted his hands slightly on the wheel, then finally pressed his foot to the brake and eased the car into motion. Slow, controlled. The vehicle rolled forward, merging back into the flow of traffic without urgency, without the sharp acceleration that often followed a call. His partner leaned back into the seat, letting out a small breath, then glanced at Ryan again. "You are quiet," he said, not pressing, just noticing. Ryan kept his eyes on the road, the corners of his focus widening, taking in more than just the lane ahead, the sidewalks, the intersections, the subtle details he might have overlooked before. "Just thinking," he replied. His voice was calm, but there was something deeper in it now, something that did not rush to fill space. They drove for a few blocks in silence, the city unfolding around them, storefronts passing by, traffic lights shifting from red to green, the normal cadence of patrol returning. But inside the car, something had shifted. Ryan's partner tapped lightly on the dashboard, a habit more than anything, then spoke again. "You really think she was running something official?" The question carried curiosity, not doubt, just the need to place what they had seen into something that made sense. Ryan nodded once, eyes still forward. "Yeah," he said. "I do." He paused, then added, and even if she was not, that would not have changed how she handled it. The statement lingered in the air between them, simple but layered. His partner frowned slightly, considering that, then nodded slowly, not fully understanding, but recognizing the weight behind it. Those dogs, he started, then trailed off, shaking his head. They were different. Ryan allowed a faint exhale, almost a quiet agreement. They were trained, he said. But more than that, they were aligned. He did not elaborate further, but the words stayed there, hanging in the space between them. Aligned. It was not just about obedience. It was about presence, about purpose, about something that did not need to prove itself to exist. The car slowed at a red light, the brake pressing gently under his foot, the engine settling into a softer hum. A man stood on the corner waiting to cross, holding a small paper bag, glancing at the traffic, then at the signal. Ryan watched him for a moment, not as a potential problem, not as a subject, just as a person moving through his day. The light changed. The man stepped forward. Ryan did not move immediately. He waited half a second longer, allowing the man to cross fully, his foot easing off the brake only after the space was clear. It was a small thing, routine, but the pause was new. The awareness was new. They continued down the street, turning onto a quieter road, lined with trees that cast soft shadows across the pavement. The radio crackled again, another call coming through, something about a minor disturbance a few blocks away. Nothing urgent, nothing unusual. Ryan reached up and acknowledged it, his voice steady, controlled, but different now. Not sharper, not quicker, just measured. He lowered his hand from the radio and adjusted his grip on the wheel, his posture settling into something that felt both familiar and new at the same time. His partner looked out the window, then back at Ryan, then finally spoke again, quieter this time. You think moments like that happen often? Ryan considered the question, his eyes tracking the road, the way the light filtered through the trees, the way the city continued without pause. No, he said after a second. I think they happen when you are not looking for them. His partner nodded slowly, leaning back again, letting that sit. The car moved forward, steady, unhurried, blending into the flow of everything around it. And somewhere ahead, beyond the next intersection, beyond the next call, the day continued, carrying with it the quiet weight of something learned, something that would not show up on a report, something that would not be written down, but something that would remain, shaping the way Ryan Whitaker saw the next person, the next moment, the next decision, not as a pattern to confirm, but as a story he had not yet heard. The patrol car turned onto the quieter street just as the radio voice sharpened, the calm tone replaced with something more urgent, not loud, but edged with concern. Unit 12, respond to a reported K9 disturbance near Westbrook Avenue. Possible uncontrolled animals in a public area. The words hung in the air for a split second before Ryan Whitaker's eyes flicked toward the dashboard, then back to the road ahead, his grip on the wheel tightening just slightly, not from panic, but from recognition. His partner leaned forward a bit, brow furrowing. K9 disturbance, he repeated, glancing over. That is 2 blocks from here. Ryan nodded once, already easing his foot onto the accelerator, the patrol car picking up speed, but not recklessly, not rushed, just with purpose. The rhythm of the drive changed, the engine humming a little louder, the space between decisions shrinking again, but something in Ryan remained steady, grounded in the shift that had taken place earlier. Dispatch, this is Unit 12, we are en route, he said into the radio, his voice controlled, clear, but there was something beneath it now, something more aware, more measured than before. The city blurred slightly at the edges as they moved faster, storefronts. Passing in quick succession, pedestrians turning their heads as the patrol car went by, not with alarm, just with curiosity. His partner checked the side mirror, then leaned back again. You think it is related? He asked, the question quiet, but loaded with the possibility neither of them needed to say out loud. Ryan did not answer immediately. His eyes stayed forward, focused, tracking the road, the intersections, the flow of traffic. Then he spoke. I think we are about to find out. The words were calm, but they carried weight. They turned onto Westbrook Avenue, and the atmosphere shifted instantly. It was subtle at first. A small cluster of people standing farther down the block, not moving forward, not running away, just watching. A delivery van parked at an angle, its driver standing outside, arms crossed, his posture uncertain. The kind of stillness that did not belong to a normal morning. Ryan slowed the car as they approached, not stopping yet, just reducing speed, letting the scene come into focus before stepping into it. His partner leaned forward slightly, scanning. "I do not see anything yet," he said, but his voice carried hesitation. Ryan did not respond. He had learned something earlier. Not everything revealed itself at once. He pulled the car to a controlled stop near the edge of the gathering, leaving space, not pushing into the center immediately. They stepped out, the doors closing behind them with a firm but quiet sound, their boots hitting the pavement in unison. The air felt different here, not tense in the same way as before, more uncertain, more expectant. Ryan moved forward slowly, not with the same direct authority as earlier, but with awareness, his eyes scanning not just for movement, but for context, for detail. "What is going on?" he asked one of the bystanders, a middle-aged man standing near the front of the group. The man shook his head slightly. "We heard something, dogs, maybe, but not like normal." Then it just got quiet. Ryan exchanged a brief glance with his partner, then stepped past the edge of the crowd, his movements deliberate, measured. And then he saw it. Down the block, near the entrance of a small fenced lot, two figures stood in the open space. Familiar. The posture, the stillness. Imani Carter. And beside her, the two dogs, exactly as before, positioned with the same quiet precision, their bodies aligned, their presence controlled. But this time, there was something else. A second figure stood across from her, partially obscured by the angle of the fence, their posture tense, uncertain, not aggressive, but clearly not grounded in the same calm. Ryan felt the shift immediately. This was different. This was not a misunderstanding. This was a moment that had already begun before they arrived. He slowed his steps, not approaching too quickly, not interrupting, remembering what he had just learned, letting the scene breathe before stepping into it. His partner mirrored him, staying just behind, watching closely. The distance between them and Imani closed gradually, each step measured, the sound of their boots quiet against the pavement. Ryan's eyes moved between her and the other figure, reading posture, reading space, reading something deeper than words. He stopped a few feet short, not crossing into the center, not taking control, just present at the edge. Imani did not turn immediately. She did not acknowledge them right away. Her focus remained forward, her body aligned, the dog still, unwavering. Then, without raising her voice, without shifting her stance, she spoke. "You got here faster this time." The words were calm, almost conversational, but they carried recognition. Ryan felt a small, almost imperceptible shift in his chest, something between readiness and understanding. "We were close," he replied, his tone steady, not interrupting, not asserting, just present. Imani gave the slightest nod, her eyes still forward. "Good," she said. And in that moment, standing at the edge of a situation that had already begun to unfold, Ryan understood that this time, he was not stepping in to control it. He was stepping in to witness it. Ryan Whitaker did not step any closer. He held his position at the edge of the space, just as he had learned to do, letting the moment unfold without forcing himself into the center of it. The air felt tighter here than before, not with confusion, but with something more focused, something that carried purpose. Imani Carter stood exactly as she had before, grounded, still, her presence steady in a way that did not waver, and the two dogs beside her mirrored that stillness with precision, their bodies aligned, their attention fixed forward, not distracted, not reacting, just present. The second figure across from her shifted slightly, a man in his late 30s, dressed in a worn jacket, his posture uncertain, his weight moving from one foot to the other as if he could not decide whether to step forward or step away. His eyes flicked between Imani and the dogs, then toward the officers, then back again, searching for something to anchor himself to. "I told you," the man said, his voice uneven but not raised. "I did not mean for anything to go wrong." The words hung in the air, not aggressive, not defensive, just strained with the weight of something unresolved. Imani did not respond immediately. She did not rush to fill the space. Instead, she let the silence sit, letting his words settle before answering. "Intent does not erase outcome," she said calmly, her voice carrying just enough to reach him without pressing against him. The man's shoulders tightened slightly, his gaze dropping for a moment before lifting again, his breathing shallow but controlled. Ryan watched closely, not just the words, but the space between them, the distance, the posture, the way the dogs remained still, their presence not escalating the moment, but containing it, holding it within a boundary that did not need to be spoken. His partner shifted behind him, instinctively ready to move in, but Ryan raised a hand slightly, not looking back, just enough to signal stillness. Not yet. The man took a small step to the side, not toward Imani, not away, just repositioning, like he was trying to find ground that felt stable. I was just supposed to hand it off, he continued, his voice quieter now, more focused. That is all. I did not know what it was going to turn into. Imani's gaze remained steady on him, not judging, not softening, just clear. And now you do, she replied. The statement did not accuse. It acknowledged. The man exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair, his movements restless but contained. So what happens now? He asked, echoing the same question Ryan had asked earlier, but from a different place, a place that carried consequence rather than curiosity. Imani tilted her head slightly, considering him, then glanced briefly toward the fence behind him, then back. Now, she said, you decide if you are going to keep reacting, or if you are going to take responsibility. The words landed with quiet weight, not pushing him, but placing the decision in front of him in a way that could not be ignored. The man swallowed, his jaw tightening, his eyes flicking once more toward the officers, then back to Imani, as if trying to measure what each choice would mean. Ryan remained still, his presence steady, not advancing, not withdrawing, just there, holding the edge of the moment without stepping into it. The dogs shifted slightly, a small adjustment in their stance, their focus still forward, their awareness encompassing everything without reacting to any single movement. The man let out another breath, longer this time, his shoulders lowering just a fraction as if something inside him was settling, not completely, but enough to move forward. Slowly, he reached into his jacket pocket, his movement careful, not sudden, not defensive, just deliberate. Ryan's eyes tracked the motion, his body ready, but not tense, his stance grounded in awareness rather than reaction. The man pulled out a small object, something wrapped, contained, held between his fingers with hesitation, like he was aware of its weight beyond its size. He looked at it for a second, then back at Imani. This is it, he said quietly. Imani did not step forward immediately. She let him hold it for a second longer, letting the moment stretch just enough to make the action intentional. Then she nodded once. Place it on the ground, she said, her voice calm, measured. The man hesitated, just briefly, then crouched down, setting the object carefully on the pavement between them before stepping back, his hands visible, his posture open, no longer shifting, no longer searching. The dogs remained still, their presence unchanged, their attention steady, holding the space as if marking the boundary of the moment. Imani stepped forward then, one controlled step, her movement precise, her focus unbroken. Ryan watched as she approached, not intervening, not interrupting, understanding now that this was her moment to complete, not his to take over. She crouched down, her hand reaching toward the object, her movements careful, practiced, the same calm precision she had shown from the beginning. And standing there, just outside the center of it all, Ryan realized that this was the difference, not in power, not in authority, but in presence, the ability to hold a situation steady without forcing it, to guide it without raising a voice, to let it resolve without breaking it apart. And for the first time that morning, he did not feel the need to step in. He understood exactly why he should not. Imani Carter did not rush the movement. Her hand hovered just above the object for a brief second, not hesitating, but allowing the moment to settle completely before she touched it, as if confirming that everything around it had reached the point where it could be handled without disruption. The morning light reflected softly across the surface of the wrapped item, revealing nothing of its contents, only the careful way it had been contained, the intention behind how it had been passed, and now, how it would be received. Her fingers closed around it with quiet precision, lifting it from the pavement in one smooth motion, her posture steady, her breathing unchanged. The dogs did not move. They did not lean in or shift toward the object. Their focus remained outward, scanning, holding the perimeter with the same calm discipline they had shown from the beginning, their presence constant, grounding the space around her. The man across from her watched closely, his shoulders still lowered from before, his stance no longer shifting, his hands visible at his sides. There was no urgency in him now, only the weight of what he had already chosen, the understanding that the moment had moved beyond reaction and into consequence. Ryan Whitaker stood at the edge of it all, his attention fixed on the smallest details, the way Imani handled the object, the way the man held himself, the way the dogs maintained their position without needing a single command. He noticed the absence of escalation, the absence of force, the way the situation moved forward through control that did not need to announce itself. It was different from anything he had been trained to step into, but it worked. Imani straightened slowly, the object now secure in her hand, and for a brief second, her eyes closed, not in exhaustion, not in relief, but in acknowledgement, like a checkpoint reached, a step completed in something larger than the street they stood on. When she opened them again, her gaze returned to the man, steady, clear. "You did the right thing," she said quietly. The words were simple, but they carried weight, not as praise, not as approval, but as recognition. The man nodded once, a small movement, his expression shifting slightly, not into comfort, but into something closer to acceptance. "I should have done it sooner," he replied, his voice low, but no longer uneven. Imani tilted her head just a fraction, acknowledging that without expanding on it, without turning it into something more than it needed to be. "You did it when it mattered," she said. The distinction was subtle, but it landed. Ryan felt that too, the way her words did not dwell on what had been missed, but anchored themselves in what had been done. It was a different kind of authority, one that did not hold people in their mistakes, but moved them through them. His partner shifted slightly behind him, exhaling softly, the tension that had lingered finally easing completely from his posture. The crowd at the edges had grown quieter still, some beginning to disperse, others lingering just long enough to see the resolution, to understand without needing every detail explained. Imani stepped back once, the movement controlled, creating a small distance between herself and the man, the dogs adjusting instantly to match her position, maintaining the same structure, the same silent coordination that had defined every moment since they arrived. Ryan noticed that again, the way nothing about their movement was reactive, everything was intentional. He took a slow breath, the weight of the moment settling fully into him now, not as tension, but as understanding. This was not about control. It never had been. It was about presence, about knowing when to step forward and when to step back, about recognizing the difference between acting and observing, between assumption and awareness. Imani turned slightly then, not away from the man entirely, but enough to shift the focus of the moment forward, signaling that what needed to happen here had happened. "Someone will follow up with you," she said to him, her voice calm, direct. "Be ready to answer clearly." The man nodded again, more firmly this time, his posture steady, grounded in the choice he had made. "I will," he said. There was no hesitation in it now. Imani gave a small acknowledgement of that, then turned her gaze briefly toward Ryan. Not long, not heavy, just enough to meet his eyes across the space that had once been filled with tension and was now filled with something else entirely. Understanding. Respect. Ryan nodded once, the movement quiet but certain, no longer carrying the weight of authority, but the clarity of someone who had learned something he would not forget. Imani did not say anything else. She did not need to. She turned fully then, stepping away from the center of the moment, the dogs moving with her in perfect alignment, their presence as steady in departure as it had been in arrival. The space they left behind did not collapse. It held, quiet, resolved. Ryan remained where he was for a second longer, watching as she moved away, the sunlight catching along the edge of her silhouette, the rhythm of the city slowly folding back around her. Then he exhaled, a slow, steady breath, and understood something that had not been clear before, that sometimes the strongest action was not the one that stepped in, but the one that knew exactly when not to. The space they left behind did not fill immediately. It lingered, like the echo of something that had passed through but refused to disappear completely. Ryan Whitaker stood where he was, his boots grounded against the pavement, his posture no longer defined by urgency or command, but by stillness. the kind that did not come from inaction, but from understanding when nothing else needed to be done. The man across from him shifted slightly, looking down at the spot where the object had been just moments before, then back up, as if trying to place himself again in a moment that had already moved on without him. His shoulders rose and fell once in a steady breath, then settled, his stance no longer uncertain, no longer searching. "That is it?" he asked quietly, not expecting an answer, more speaking to the space than to anyone in it. Ryan looked at him, really looked this time, not through a lens of suspicion, not through a report or a description, but as someone who had just made a decision that mattered. "That is it," Ryan replied. His voice was calm, not dismissive, not authoritative, just grounded. The man nodded slowly, as if confirming something to himself, then stepped back once, then again, creating distance not out of fear, but out of closure. The crowd had thinned now, the edges dissolving as people returned to their routines, conversations picking up in low tones, footsteps moving with purpose again. The city did what it always did. It continued. But for those who had stayed long enough to witness the shift, something quieter remained beneath it all. Ryan's partner exhaled softly beside him, glancing once more down the street where Imani had disappeared, then back. "She just walked away," he said, almost in disbelief, but not questioning, just noticing. Ryan gave the faintest nod. "She did what she came to do," he replied. The simplicity of it settled deeper than explanation. His partner looked at him for a second, then nodded as well, accepting it without needing more. They stood there for another moment, not because they had to, but because leaving too quickly would have felt like missing the end of something important. Ryan shifted his weight slightly, then finally turned toward the patrol car, his movement unhurried, deliberate, each step carrying the quiet weight of what had just unfolded. The door opened with a familiar sound, the interior of the car unchanged, the radio still murmuring softly. The world still moving forward as it always did. But he did not get in right away. He paused with one hand resting on the door frame, looking out once more at the street, at the space where everything had shifted, at the faint line of sunlight stretching across the pavement where Imani had stood earlier. His reflection caught briefly in the side mirror, not sharp, not clear, but enough to see the outline of someone who was not standing exactly the same as before. His partner slid into the passenger seat, buckling in, glancing at him once more, waiting without saying anything. Ryan took a slow breath, then another, the air moving through him differently now, not just filling his lungs, but settling into something deeper, something that did not rush to be named. He stepped into the car and closed the door, the sound firm but not abrupt, sealing the moment behind him without erasing it. The engine hummed steadily as he started it again, his hands resting on the wheel, not gripping, not tense, just placed there with quiet intention. He looked forward, the road stretching out in front of him, lined with movement, with people, with moments that would come and go without warning. His partner adjusted in his seat, then finally spoke, his voice softer than before. "You think we will see her again?" Ryan considered the question, not rushing to answer, letting it settle for a second before speaking. "Maybe," he said. Then after a pause, he added, "But even if we do not, it does not change what this was." His partner nodded slowly, leaning back, accepting that in a way that did not need to be explained further. Ryan eased the car forward, merging back into the flow of traffic, the movement smooth, controlled, but different in a way that could not be seen from the outside. The city moved around them, unchanged in its rhythm, unchanged in its pace. But for him, something had shifted. Not in what he did, but in how he saw it. A man crossed the street ahead, carrying a bag, his pace steady. Ryan slowed slightly, giving him space, not out of obligation, but out of awareness. The moment was small, almost invisible, but it mattered. The sunlight filtered through the windshield. Soft, and even now, no longer sharp, no longer dividing the scene into lines of tension and shadow. Just light, just clarity. And as the patrol car moved forward, blending into the endless flow of the city, Ryan understood something that would stay with him long after the day ended. That respect did not come from control, and authority did not come from assumption, and that sometimes, the most powerful presence in a moment was the one that did not need to prove itself at all. And somewhere ahead, already part of another moment, Imani Carter walked on, her steps steady, her presence quiet, leaving behind not a story of confrontation, but something far more lasting, a reminder that dignity, when it stands firm, does not need to be defended, it simply needs to be recognized.